According to Wikipedia, the Oldsmobile Aerotech was a series of experimental high-speed vehicles manufactured between 1987 and 1992 by Oldsmobile, with the intention of breaking multiple automobile speed records. They featured the quad-4 engine, an inline 4. There was a long-tail version and a short-tail version. The short-tail was the inspiration for this casting by Matchbox. Matchbox released this casting in 1989, and there are three variations. One with a silver gray body, similar to the actual car that we're going to try and recreate in a way here. And there was a fluorescent orange body and a purple and white, which is the one we're beginning with. Now, the markings on the Matchbox version of their silver version are oversized, and it's just not quite right. So I created a decal set for this, but here you see me taking apart the casting itself. Those wheels had that spring steel holding them down, so they came out really easily. I do end up using those wheels. The glass is not in good shape. There's a chunk out of it, and it's pretty rough. Now you see I took the back cowl off of the car. It was hinged, and honestly, those are always a pain in the butt to me. And I like just making it a lift-off cowl. So that's what I did on this one. Both of the posts are in that center section. Let's call it the center section of the body. The main part of the body. What you see right there. Both posts are in that. So one of the posts is really short, so I ended up using self-tapping screws on both of them. It seemed like the easiest and most logical way to go. The casting itself had, after I stripped the paint, it's rough. This thing had a lot of flash and casting lines, and just what made it really difficult to work is I didn't want to screw up the lines of the body, but I wanted to get rid of as many casting lines as I could. But, it's that kind of thing where you don't want to change the shape of the vehicle. You easily can. That's the problem. So I filed a lot of it off. I wet sanded a lot of it, as you see here. And it was just a time-consuming process, and unfortunately not entirely satisfying, because there's some lines I did want to leave on the car, so I couldn't get them exactly the way I wanted. So there you see where I ended up. That's after all the wet sanding and everything. And then for the back half, because there's no posts or anything, I just took a piece of wire, axle wire that I've used before, used a Bondic resin pin to basically attach that wire so that I had something to hold on to when I was painting it. So that always seems to work pretty well. And I can tell you, sneak peek towards the end, that does pop off really easily without any problem. So what I did is I spray painted it. Instead of using regular paint, I used Duplicolor Metalcast base coat as the silver. That seemed to be the closest thing I could find that I had on hand, too, to the actual original car. There you see the super freaking tiny decals on this. And part of that decal set is a thin red line that goes around the body of the car. And I got to tell you, I do that off camera for most of it. Like the part around the front edge of the leading edge of the bumper there, I do that off camera because that freaking thing is like sticking down a hair. And it not only is it twitchy, but when the decal came off the paper, I lost track of which side was up. It was that bad. And so I do show where I put the Oldsmobile logo on the hood, and then I do this side logo. And I stopped recording because it's just not pretty when I'm doing this. And, the voiceover, I would have done a lot of screaming and yelling if I didn't do voiceovers. So I wanted to get that red edge, that red stripe, as close to that bottom edge as I could get. I used microsol and then microset to really get it to snug down properly so that I wouldn't have any worries about that coming off. And there you see where that ended up, and then now you see that back. You can barely see it there, but there is a red stripe going up there at the left side of that casting. I do that on both sides. I do it around the front edge, and you'll see the results later. I wanted to keep the wheels, and quite some time ago, I apologized to Dirt Modeler. He was really kind and sent me a bunch of their metal parts, and there you see some. And that was about the best thing I could figure out to use for the kind of aerodynamic, space-agey kind of wheels that the Aerotech has on it. And so I just sanded down the original wheels and glued those in place with CA glue. And so it's the original wheels. And their Dirt Modeler's parts are really cool. It's taken me a while to figure out a use for it, to be honest. I use so many replacement wheels, like Samed wheels or monoblock wheels, or that kind of thing, or Redline replacement wheels, that these pieces going, I don't do like a lot of older cars, which I think they'd be great on, going over just standard Matchbox or standard Hot Wheels wheels. I don't do that many of those. So the standard steely type wheel kind of thing, I'm not that builder. So, but in this case, they were perfect. I sent them an email quite a while back saying I wish they did dash panels out of that metal. That'd be fantastic. But anyhow, you can find them on Facebook and Instagram. I do put information about Dirt Modeler in the description of the video. The windshield on this is absolute crap. It has a huge chunk out of it. It has some huge gouges at the top edge. So I ended up, I considered trying to vacuum form a canopy for it, decided against it. Lord knows why, but I did. I didn't think I'd get a good enough fit, to be honest with you. And, it would have taken a lot of shots. So I just ended up wet sanding this one with 3000 grit, that sanding sponge that you saw earlier, then busted out the flits. It's always a good time for flits, and what's coming next, right? I mean, if I have glass that's in rough shape, dunk that thing in gauzy, son. And even better, this glass had a perfect little tab to hang on to when you're doing it. As far as dunking this thing in gauzy, it couldn't have been easier. So yeah, everybody gets their gauzy fix now. And obviously this it doesn't fix it. It doesn't repair it, but it masks it adequately. There's still a chunk. Don't get me wrong. There's still a chunk gone. But damn, it's shiny around it. So, you got to do what you can, and that's what I could do. So there you see the wheels. I've thrown those back under that spring steel that's there. That base was painted with Duplicolor Perfect Match medium charcoal metallic that I've had for quite a while. I had that when I originally did the K7 Dragster. So yeah, paint's probably 2 years old at this point. I did add some additional details. The engine the engine bay and the cockpit, for lack of a better term, I did go over with Nuln Oil, as you saw earlier. I did add some additional details to that. And then I painted over the block where the Quad 4 is engraved, for lack of a better term. And then I scraped that raised area off so you do see some of the lettering. So you'll get a little better look at that in a second. I did need to use a washer on the back of the car here when I was putting it together. because let's just say I didn't drill it that well. It could have gone better. But the washer cured all ills back there. And again, I think I mentioned before, I did use self-tapping screws on this. I do not attach that cowl in its original fashion where it's hinged. I'm just, seriously, I think that's the way I'm going to do all of these from now on, is just have it as a lift-off cowl. Because then you can detail that area better, you can paint that area better. It solves a lot of problems. And, these things aren't going to be played with by kids. So I think the thing that makes me happiest about this build is that super thin red stripe around the car. And the Aerotech decals, which are true to scale as opposed to the regular Matchbox version. Which I understand why they do them oversized. But if you're going for realism compared to the original car, you got to scale them down. You notice you can't really see the interior on this one, the way it came from Matchbox. But that's where we started. And I think the finished car that you'll see here in just a second is much more similar to the original short tail version of the old Aerotech. Interestingly enough, AJ Foyt was involved in the speed runs of the long tail version of the Aerotech, which is kind of cool. A blast from the past. So there you have it. That's where we ended up. There's some glamour shots coming up. This was a fun build. I found this thing in my junk bin of cars, basically, and thought, hey, let's find out what this is first, what the Aerotech actually is. And it didn't have a fantasy name, so I knew it was a real car. I wasn't aware of it before doing this research. But I hope you've enjoyed this, and I had fun doing it. It was a fun little interesting build, something a little different. So, thanks for watching, and everybody stay safe and healthy out there. Thanks to my Patreon supporters for all of their help, and catch you in the next one.